Welcome to episode 4. Let's talk a little bit about how wines look, smell, taste, and even feel. So there really exist 3 broad categories of wines as it relates to color. You have your white, your blush, and your red. The range for each category goes from the palest clear yellow hue all the way to the darkest inky purple, almost black hue. The intensity of a wine's color can actually give you, the drinker, an idea of how this wine might taste and the intensity of flavor you can expect. Let's take the golden hue of a classic white Chardonnay. This actually hints at an oaky, little more mature wine with a more intense body and texture, whereas the light, almost translucent, pale straw yellow that's common in Sauvignon Blancs, for example, would suggest a younger, lighter bodied, more crisp, almost refreshing to taste wine. So really, what impacts the colors of whites and reds? With your whites, oxidization, a result of exposure to air over time, will darken or deepen white wines from a faint pale yellow to a golden, caramel, almost brown. And this is a common trait seen in our barrel-aged whites like Chardonnays. With our reds, we will see darkened hues for more concentrated wines. However, with age, reds actually grow paler, lighten, and even turn a little pale brown as gravity begins to affect their color compounds. The intensity of hues in red wines has a lot to do actually with the varietal itself, or the grape type, the ripeness, and the techniques that are applied in the winemaking process as it relates to the skins. So for example, cooler climate, thinner skinned grapes like Pinot Noir produce a lighter red hue and a lighter body, while thicker skinned, warm climate grapes like our Syrahs produce a deeper red hue. So let's talk about taste versus smell. We actually spend just as much time sniffing wine as we do drinking it, simply because the scents we get from our wines are significantly more distinctive than the flavors we capture in our mouths. The sensory process is 3-part. You get how the wine smells via your nose, how it actually tastes on your tongue, and how it feels on the fleshy parts of your mouth, like your cheeks and your gums, for example. So we can split smell into 2 parts, external and internal smell. External smells register in our brain actually as odors, while internal smells register as flavor. So think of it this way. A common example used to describe this entire system simply is creme brulee. You eat it and you think, it tastes sweet and creamy, and you actually associate vanilla and caramel flavors in your mind. However, the science behind sensory recognizes only sweetness as the sole taste you experience, as sweetness is really the only thing your taste buds can detect. Flavors like vanilla or caramel are actually olfactory sensations, smells, while your creaminess that you become aware of as you eat is actually a tactile sensation. It's something you feel, and it actually describes the mouthfeel of the dessert. So let's break down taste and smell. There are at least 10,000 different things we can actually smell. However, there are only truly 6 things that we can taste. We taste sweet, sour, umami, bitter, salty, and fat. And you note I didn't mention spicy, and that's because we don't actually taste spice, we feel it. Spice is a tactile sensation. Our noses are our most important sensory tool in the whole consumption of food and wine. Most of what we perceive as flavor is really just olfactory stimuli or smell. So technically speaking, there really isn't any real difference between odors and flavors except the direction from which we receive them, the nose versus the mouth. So remember those descriptors we spoke about in our previous episodes? They actually become much more clear to us once we actually understand the difference between taste sensations that we receive on our taste buds and smell sensations that we receive via our olfactory nerves. So to put it simply, when we taste wine characteristics like sweetness or acidity, that information is received on our tongues. We are able, however, to receive and assess many more intricate characteristics of wine in the form of scents and flavors when the aroma compounds in the wine hit our olfactory nerves. So taste. Of the 6 taste sensations we discussed, sweetness and acidity are the only 2 sensations really important in wine tasting. So let's talk about sweet. That sugary sensation on the tip of your tongue. Most wines are typically described as dry, and simply put, there is no noticeable presence of sugar. Sweet wines, however, tend to be more approachable and pleasing to starter wine drinkers because it kind of reminds them a bit of juice. The truth is, the majority of wines produced are actually dry simply because they're easier to make and they have the ability to maintain a longer shelf life. And they actually work really well with various types of food. So we've dealt with sweet, let's talk about sour or acidic. Consider when you consume lemon juice or something vinegary. Acidity is perceived as a sour sensation that actually makes your mouth salivate almost instantly. Now, because fresh grapes are highly acidic wines, they are more tart actually than other types of beverages. So the good thing to note is that acidity is strongest at first sip, but it actually diminishes as you continue to drink, and it does so especially if you're eating properly paired foods. Tangy, crisp, and tart are words that commonly describe these kinds of wines. So let's talk a little bit about smell. Fruit. This is a word that's most common and applicable when we describe the olfactory scents and flavors we encounter when we taste wines. And after all, wine is made from 100% fruit, so naturally. 2 distinctive ways to categorize your wine scent: by fruit or oak. Fruit intensity ranges from mild to bold or concentrated. So think chamomile tea versus espresso. Great examples of a wine's fruit component that are commonly used would be pineapple, blackcurrant, even non-fruit related flavors like herbal, grassy, peppery, or even floral. All these descriptors and those alike form the basis of describing the dimensions of wine's fruit component. Fruity tends, however, to lend itself to the strong, ripe, dessert-like smells of actual fruits. So think of the fruity nature of ripe Julie mangoes or ripe bananas or pineapples. Very strong, sometimes even pungent. Oak, however, those wine scents and flavors derived from the contact with wood, toasted oak barrels in particular. These impart characteristics during the winemaking process. And wines with the oak influence take on additional oaky smells like vanilla, allspice or baking spice, caramel, and even nuts. Let's talk about how wines feel. Commonly, we refer to that as mouthfeel. This is a tactile sensation we actually perceive with our tongues on our palates, lips, and our gums. So things like crispiness, creaminess, or spiciness are all tactile sensations. Carbonation in our bubbly sparkling wine also falls into this category. Texture is also applicable here as well, as our mouths are able to actually deduce the physical sensation of viscosity from food items. And this is where the term body in wines comes into play. The weight of wine can be closely compared to milk. So light-bodied wines can be compared in weight to the texture of skim milk, for example. Medium-bodied wines can be compared in weight to the texture of chocolate milk. And then your heavy, full-bodied wines actually can be compared in weight to the texture of a chocolate milkshake. It's also important to note and observe that as the alcohol volume or the level of alcohol increases in your wine, so too does the weight of the wine. And the final thing to consider is the effects of tannin in wines. So tannin is actually an astringent compound that's found in red wines in the skins, seeds and stems of the grapes. And tannins are significant in red wines because these wines are fermented in contact with the skins and the stems. Tannins actually dry out the mouth shortly after you taste the wine, but they add depth to color as well as intensity of flavor in our red wines. It's important not to confuse tannin in wines with the dryness of wines. A dry wine is simply one that is not sweet, the absence of sugar, while wines that dry out the mouth are actually described as tannic. Pick your preference, your sweet, beautiful, fruity wines, or your nice, bold, dry, tannic red wines. None is wrong. They're all right and we all enjoy them. So hit us up in the comment sections and let us know what you like. Are you more of the dry red wine type, or are you into those sweet, fruity dessert wines? Let us know.